The Rockpile Report, the pettiest, hardest drinking Bills podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I'm your host, Bills season ticket holder Drew Gear. That's my producer, Chris Kruger. And in studio with us tonight, Mr. Ryan Lasal from ROC Sports Network.
Hey guys, how's it going? Season ticket holder Ryan Lasal.
Season ticket holder Ryan Lasal. He's been busting my balls about this forever, and I love it. Now I steer into it, which is what I do. Anytime, like if someone points out, hey, you're doing this and it annoys me, don't do that. Because if you do, now I'm obligated to continue.
Yeah. And I knew that about you. That's why I leaned into it.
I love it. How you been, brother?
Been good, man. You know, I'm just now starting to pay attention to the Bills, so it should be a fun show. But we're talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, as you well know.
So guys, I just want to start the show with a disclaimer. We're doing this now, and the reason that we're doing it now is because I feel like I didn't want to wait for the NFL season to start. Because then it would come across as disingenuous, yes. Right? Especially if you wait, the NFL and the NHL seasons to get underway.
Well, we saw what happened to Ty Dunn, right? Well, when you hold the story, quote unquote.
When some of the less intelligent members of our community and fan base try to label things as a hit piece simply because one of the teams isn't performing up to snuff. I think the way that you kind of get around that is you just say what's on your mind before anyone can really paint you into that corner, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Everyone's 0-0 right now.
So in that way, we've gotten together here tonight, and if you saw the thumbnail and thought it was clickbait and you're here, it's really not. What we're here to talk about tonight is something that I think doesn't get talked about enough with everything that's going on with the Bills and with the Sabres, and it involves our owner, Terry Pegula. And just what kind of an owner is Terry Pegula? Now, I think it's a legitimate discussion, right? It's a topic that I find really interesting. One of the most commonly used tropes when it comes to talking about sports, where it doesn't matter where you are in the world, what sport you're talking about, it's the concept that insert name here, that guy sucks. Okay. It's an easy thing to say. Whether it's said out of frustration, whether it's coming from a place of like, hey, I learned a piece of information. Hey, whoa, Chris is raising a glass.
Yeah, glasses first.
So before we get into this, because it's a fancy conversation, it calls for fancy drinks. What do we got here in front of us, Chris?
This is a Black Manhattan, Black Heart, not good. Hasn't done good with the Sabres. He's been out of the public eye with the Bills, which we'll get into. Why doesn't talk to the media?
So you're literally giving
it's Black
theme
Heart
drink.
Yeah,
it's a theme drink
for tonight.
Cheers,
Chris. Cheers.
Yeah. Also, the theme drink to my wedding. The signature cocktail at my wedding.
All right.
So
which he doesn't tell people. I went to go order one at his wedding, and he literally stepped in and was like, No. You don't give him the well stuff. He drinks this thing over here. So I'm drinking 100 proof all night. Well, what was that? Was it even higher than that?
Possibly.
I think it was above 100 proof. And instead of like a formal sit down dinner, they did what I think was one of the cooler formats, which is just like
cocktail party.
Think of charcuterie, but on steroids.
Yeah.
So like little roast beef sandwiches, but like a lot of cheeses and crackers and just stuff, right? Except when you're me, I see a little sandwich and I go, all right, well,
I'll have 6 of them.
Appetizer, I'll eat that later.
I figured it'd be right up your alley.
Cheese,
you eat with your hands.
Yeah, but the problem is that I don't eat as much as I do this.
Sure.
Because it's all finger foods. You're not forcing me into a seat to eat something that's on a plate in front of me.
Now, if you see something running low in a situation like that, does like a primal instinct kick in?
Yes, 100%. There was actually some really good cheddar up there. And I saw like 4 cubes of it left. And I remember like I was on like near the dance floor where his cousins were starting to cut a rug. And I ran across the room.
Checked grandma.
If someone had gotten in my way, it would have gotten ugly.
Yeah.
But that also led to me showing my ass to my father-in-law, because then later that night I came home. I thought I was pulling everything together. I'm like, listen, nobody knows how bombed I am because I've been drinking 100 proof whiskey on an almost empty stomach all night. And then I leaned over to untie my shoes, and like almost just like face first, just tipped over into the refrigerator. He's the only one who saw it. Love him to death because he didn't blow me in.
Yeah, I feel like Chris, and you might agree with me on this. I feel like that happens to Drew a lot, where he does the whole like in his head, nobody knows how drunk I am, but then everybody knows exactly how drunk Drew is. Like every show that you guys record, you can hear Drew getting drunker and drunker, and Drew probably thinks just like, man, I've had a lot to drink tonight. Nobody can tell.
Nobody's the wiser.
Yeah. So speaking of cocktails, Monday, because Iman tweeted this out, how good Adolph's wings were. So Jessica and I went to Adolph's for chicken wings on Monday. Lived up to the hype that Iman put out in the same way that I like Mam Moser's wings. Mam Moser's in Hamburg, they do their own sauce. It's their own recipe for hot sauce. Adolph's has their own blue cheese deal. Better than Rudy's. It's the best blue cheese I've ever had. The wings are legit. Now, Jessica and I did not know that it was 75-cent wing night.
Ooh.
So it was slightly packed. So we get to Adolph's, put our name in. They're like 45 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, we're good. So then Jessica goes, well, let's just, maybe is there like a bar close by we can go grab like a quick drink? Because the bar was pretty packed at Adolph's. So you don't want to be standing in the middle where everybody comes into the restaurant and you're immediately in the way. Yeah. So we got in the car, drove around the block. We're Googling things in the area. Nothing. And then it's already been like 5 to 10 minutes. I'm like, no, we're just going to go back to Adolph's. That's that. Get to Adolph's. Immediately, 2 spots at the bar open up. Oh, we'll take those. I'm going to go tell the hostess, I know we put our name down, but we're going to eat at the bar. They're like, oh, we just called your name. It's been like 10 minutes, and you said a 45-minute wait. But either way, we're going to sit at the bar. So
Chris is already annoyed at this point.
Jessica, he's annoyed in a situation where everyone else would be like really happy.
Yeah, so Jessica orders a beer, and the bartender goes, what about you, guy? I like look, because we're at like the end of the bar, and I'm looking, and let me get a old-fashioned with bullet. And the guy goes, I don't know what that is. I appreciate the honesty. Yeah. I told the guy, I'm like, I appreciate how honest you are that you don't know the first cocktail generally ever made in the history of drinking, the old fashioned. So I am at the bar and I go, do you have bitters? And he's like, look, finds a bottle of bitters. He goes, yeah, we got bitters. So it's just like bitters and bourbon, right? I'm like, no, you have a sugar cube or a sugar packet?
Everybody else in the bar is going, it's 75-cent wig night. I get a beer. Like, what are we doing here?
They're looking at his stupid hair and his Chelsea boots going, I've seen this in movies. I never thought I would live it.
Yeah, I walked the bartender through how to make an old-fashioned. He went back in the kitchen, got a sugar packet, and he's like, you want, like, just dump the whole thing in there. 3 dashes of bitters, 2 ounces of bourbon over ice. He did it. He looked stressed doing it. I'm like, this is old-fashioned. It's not hard. Bourbon, sugar.
It's not hard bitters. On a night other than 75-cent wing night, to be fair.
They did it.
Chris is the only guy I know who would go into a bar where clearly the guy doesn't know how to make a cocktail and go, no, I'm going to teach you something. That guy's like, I'm how old?
Right.
I'm not at the age where I should be being taught things.
He was clearly older than me.
Yeah.
Never heard of an old fashioned before. Or I guess it's like a South Buffalo thing. Like, there's like, yeah, I get we have all these spirits, but that means
it's really more for shot. It's really,
you do a shot.
Yes.
You're not,
or on the rocks.
I'm not doing a Manhattan or a old fashioned or whatever. I had to teach the bartender.
You would have sent him into a tailspin if you would have ordered like an espresso martini or something. You'd have sent him just off the deep end.
They should put it on the menu as a profiling mechanism, and the second anybody asks for it, they just kick you out.
Also, can we talk about 75-cent wing night?
I know.
In this economy?
I heard that.
That's like dollar draft night.
That's what I heard out of this whole story was like, wait, there's 75-cent wing night.
That's like back at Brockport when we would go to Barbers and it was like 25-cent wings and dollar drafts on Wednesday nights to get people in the door.
So, guys, if you want to know where you can find the Rock Bell Report on Monday nights, it's going to be over at Adolph's for 75-cent wings.
Also, what's the spelling on that? Because it's dangerously close.
ADOLF''S. It is the real deal.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
The bar came before Adolf made himself famous. So it came in.
I still feel like you got to rethink the name.
Bar. Well, the bar.
Hey, we were first, man. Never mind that idiot with the mustache. We
we can also talk about the original uses of like the SS symbols and stuff too, but we don't.
They opened in 1934. So
not that far off.
Yeah.
Like,
no.
Not. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Well, kudos to Adolph's because 75-cent wing night in this economy.
Guys, to 75-cent wings at Adolph's in South Buffalo. Guys, if you like us, you like chicken wings, go check them out.
And it sounds like if you like blue cheese.
Oh, yeah.
But if you don't want a Manhattan.
And how weird is this? Two of the top wing spots in Buffalo, 911 and Adolph's.
Yep.
Only in Buffalo.
Sean McDermott's
Sean
favorite.
McDermott is throwing.
Yeah.
The jokes make themselves. I'm not. Listen, we didn't come here to discuss Sean McDermott. That's a whole separate podcast.
That is.
We're here to talk about Terry Pegula. And for those of you who think we're going to sit here for a half hour and trash him, that is not the point of this. I want to walk you through my thought process about how we dissect where our sports owner lives.
Boca Raton.
When somebody says something sucks or a person sucks within a sports context, there's not much to be gained a lot of the times from qualifying it outside of sports. If I walk into your house and you're like, hey, came back from this party, everything was cool. And I said, yeah, that guy Tom, he sucks. There's no way for me to qualify that. And you just have to take my word for it and kind of shrug it off and be like, all right, well, I don't agree, but that just is what it is.
Yeah.
In sports, it's not quite that way, right? Because there are some things, right? Some qualifiers, even if they're a little subjective. So like I have it here. If I'm talking about a player and I want to say that player sucks.
Which you do a lot on your show.
Which I was going to say, I don't know. I don't know anybody who would get overly, because first of all, it's usually an emotional response to something, not a logical one. And I don't know anybody who prefers emotion over logic.
More than Drew Gear.
I don't know anybody. So there are statistics, right? There's wins, losses, and then there's also metrics and analytics and other statistics that you can use to compare them to their corollaries, whether it's apples to apples or, depending on how drunk you are, apples to oranges, where you can make a case for somebody being bad at what they do.
Yeah.
If you're talking about referees, judges, officials, right? You can figure out who's good and who's bad because
in today's day and age.
There's a rule book, and we can all go find what is laid out within said sports rule book. So, did that official incorrectly assign an intentional grounding call while also blatantly missing a horse collar tackle that happened right in front of him? If so, then you can say, "Oh, that guy sucks."
We've done it for how many years with Angel Hernandez in the NFL, right? Or in baseball.
Was a pass illegally thrown forward that mathematically and just with your own friggin' eyes, you can see like that was a forward pass. And yet the referees erred to make the correct call. You can point to that and say those guys suck at the job they were hired to do. So there's some empirical evidence there that you can follow to say, I can make a case to back up what I'm about to say. If you want to talk about coaches, like, style points do matter. I don't know why, but they do in sports.
Sure.
Think about the number of coaches who keep their jobs a lot longer than they should just because. Dick Duran once got an extension from this football team. Why? What did he do well?
Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati.
This is
the poster boy, Jeff Fisher. Career 500.
But ultimately, coaches are defined by their wins and losses and whether or not they win a title. Can you achieve ultimate greatness in your sport? Whether it's the NFL, whether it's the NHL, whether it's baseball, you as a coach, now as a guy who doesn't follow baseball, as a coach, if you win a World Series, there will be at least 10 teams in Major League Baseball that will still hire you after you've been fired from these other teams, because one time you won a ring, and that means that you must know something.
Yeah, you know how to do it.
Yeah.
All right, you've been there. Been there, done that.
I mean, Tomlin in Pittsburgh. Tomlin in Pittsburgh is probably when was the last time the Steelers were really competitive? Last year they made the playoffs. Somehow.
Yeah.
You go, how the hell is Mason Rudolph? This team is on its second quarterback, third quarterback. It doesn't matter.
It's never been below 500.
Mhm.
So he must be a good coach. But he wouldn't still be there if he didn't have that ring.
Right. Yep.
And these are the things that you can paper over for. You know, with the championship, unless you're in Philly, which is the Tonawanda of major cities in the United States. Like, there's a lot of smart guys who do a lot of fancy things well who get fired very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, the Dolphins are flying in the face of that this week. I messaged you today that Mike McDaniel is bizarro Sean McDermott.
Yeah. Yep.
And
I thought it was a great statement.
You've got a coach who's just extended by an owner after having not won a playoff game, just like Sean McDermott did, who is a savant at his side of the football. Like, he's a coordinator who is a savant in what he does well and just blunders in a lot of other places. And then inexplicably, his side of the ball is what fails when things get tight.
At the end of the day, right.
At the end of the day, when you ultimately lose and your season ends, a lot of your fingers go back to, okay, but you were supposed to have that. You're the guy. You built this thing.
Right,
Why does it fail us? Whether you're the Dolphins scoring 7 points in Kansas City, or whether you're the Bills whose defense just can't keep anybody under 24 points in the playoffs.
Like, can't stop a team from getting into field goal range with 13 seconds left.
It's like, why is it always you?
Yeah.
But this isn't a Sean McDermott conversation. This isn't a Mike McDaniel conversation, right? But when it comes to coaches, you can see good and bad. You can kind of intrinsically look at the empirical evidence in front of you and say, I can qualify my position. What happens when you start talking about sports team owners?
Yeah.
It's a weird gray area where you're trying to figure out what is it that, like, it's pretty reliable podcast fodder. I'll admit it, guys. To sit back here behind a microphone and go, this guy sucks. This owner stinks. Everything's terrible. Let's face it. Like, I have a superpower. Maybe it's just my natural nihilism, but when I'm hungover, there is nobody who can hate just unilaterally on any person, place, thing, or concept and throw as much legitimate shade at them as me. Everything in the world sucks. You might as well shut the sun off now and let it die. Like, that's... I go to a really dark place when I'm hungover. And so it may, like, other people find that funny, but I just... So in that way, I understand people who walk around carrying around this animosity towards things that are kind of intangible, like our sports owner. So in trying to do as much research as a person can on this topic, what I found about Terry Pegula is really interesting, because depending on where they come from, whether they're a journalist, whether they're a fan, whether it's just a buddy you know who just has an opinion, it's hard to find people who are willing to take a universal approach to trying to decide whether Terry Pegula is good or a bad owner of the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres, and just as a sports owner in general. And I find that there's two camps. There is the camp of people who is so grateful that he saved their team of choice.
Yep.
That they are unwilling to levy any criticism. And then there's the camp of people who are so bitter that neither of these teams have won a title, or that a lot of Terry Pegula's early promises haven't come to fruition, that they have nothing but criticism to offer. Or if they're an individual whose job depends on, hey, I need to write something people are going to read. Negative press sells.
Sure.
And so you can tell who the journalists are who have an agenda. And so with that in mind, I've noticed that there's very little middle ground, but I feel like that's where most people need to be. And like most things in society today, it's just hard to get there. So I wanted to have a conversation about I want to try to qualify what it is that makes a good sports owner, build a little bit of a hierarchy, and then discuss where Terry Pegula belongs in it. Because I feel like that's the only way we're ever going to really get to the nuts and bolts of where he belongs and how he should probably be viewed. So to my original point, how does one evaluate an owner? Now, I've put together a really hack PowerPoint presentation on the topic.
Yeah,
Chris?
I mean, well, I mean, if it was being graded against like other high school students, I think it would be pretty well put together.
Chris, if you want to go ahead and hit play on that bad boy.
Are there like transitions? Did you use?
Oh yeah,
animations. Are there like spin-ins and
you can just go right to the
fade-outs
top,
and...
Chris? Yeah, there we go.
Oh, all right.
What makes a good sports owner, Ryan? All right.
This is your book report?
This is my book report. What makes a good sports owner, brought to you by Drew Gear. I'm in 8th grade. Chris, keep it going. All right, so click through. I think one of the first things that a sports owner has to do is illustrate that they have franchise within the community. Like, our sports teams are kind of woven into the fabric of who we are. You know, we make the team a little bit of our personality, whether you like to admit it or not. And even if you're not a super fan, it matters to you. So a good sports owner in theory would be someone who helps endear themselves to the community and makes you feel like, even though they're just a business owner, that they care about you as a citizen of that city. And also that they have some skin, even if it's just emotional skin in the game, that they have some skin in the game too. Chris? Customer focus and servant leadership. Now, the industry you worked in, you know a little bit about these things.
Yeah. Yep.
Why don't you expand on what it is what is servant leadership? You want to qualify that?
Ryan, I expect you to be like Tom from Office Space. I work with the goddamn customers.
Yeah, so I mean, servant leadership is this concept. It's I won't get into it too much. It's actually a book that I purchase folks that report up through me so they can kind of learn the concept. I studied it during my master's program, but it's the concept of like the leader who leads by doing the things that no one else does, right? They lead through, the whole concept is this story of this trek that a group went on in the Middle East, and there was a gentleman who, he did everything. He carried the bags, he washed the shoes, everything like that, and he kept the morale up, and then all of a sudden he disappeared and the entire expedition falls apart. And they come to find out that this is the guy that bankrolled the entire expedition, and he, did everything that needed to get done as a way to keep morale up. So the concept of servant leadership is that folks are willing to go to the mat for you because they know that you're willing to go to the mat for them, right? Mm-hmm. It's this concept of leading by example. There's a lot of things that kind of spun off of it, but when it's customer focused is, I'm gonna make sure that my customers are happy because at the end of the day, they're the only ones that matter. They pay my salary. And then servant leadership is those who don't have as much skin in the game as I do because they didn't invest $1.9 billion of their own money into this organization. They want it to succeed just as much as I do because they see how much I care. Yep. Right? That's the general concept of that.
Okay. Chris, move it along. Success in their field. I think it's hard to be seen as a good sports owner. You could do all the warm, fuzzy, touchy-feely community stuff. If your team doesn't win, no one cares.
Yeah, winning cures a lot. Yep.
And Chris? Finally, I think it's understanding the social contract. You support us, we support you, and we need to feel like you support us, and that's the agreement. That's it. You personally, I don't think Terry Pegula is coming to my house with a loaf of bread. What I think is going to happen is Terry Pegula is going to work very hard, and he's going to pull a lot of strings to make sure that this thing runs well. And if he
you
does
expect that of him.
I expect that.
Okay.
And then the contract is if you do this, since it's already a thing I care about, I will continue to support it. And I will continue to have faith in it and have faith in you and your ownership and your leadership of it. And we'll all get along together. We'll continue to support both emotionally and monetarily, continue to support the thing that you do. So if these are the tenets that let's call it the 4 pillars of how to be a decent sports owner, right? Because I don't think anything here makes you great. I think this is kind of the baseline.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's similar to the 4 pillars of AEW.
There you go.
God, I hate you both. I'm going to put on one of these days, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to frog splash you across those monitors. It'll be like in the twilight of the podcast when I'm balding.
Drew, you're supposed to move the monitors if you're going to put somebody through the table. Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
If you're going to throw Mankind off the top of the cage, someone's got to move the monitors, Drew.
You know,
and
what's
put a
funny
crash
is
pad under the table.
I do recall seeing them moving all the TVs all the time and going, "Oh yeah, this is scripted." Damn it.
Yeah.
Now it's iPads.
Yeah.
So with that said, now that we understand what we think makes a good sports owner, the question is, where does he line up next to his corollaries? So Chris, if you want to move ahead to the next slide.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We have a hierarchy that I'd like to try to lay out, and I think you all know where we start. In the basement, right? Poor ownership, good ownership, average ownership. For those of you just listening to the audio format, not watching on YouTube, you are missing what is a masterclass in how to look like an 8th grader using PowerPoint. I want it known I made this thing in less than 25 minutes. Poor ownership.
Do you think if you would have spent more time on it, it would look better?
No,
Okay.
I think it would have just taken me more time.
I do like that Dan Snyder looks like he just got back his Letterman's jacket from the girl he dumped.
Dan Snyder in that picture looks like Chris if he were to go through like two more divorces, maybe.
It does. He is the Dan Snyder, folks, at the poor. We're going to work left to right for those of you listening, from poor ownership through average on to good. Poor ownership, it has to start with Dan Snyder. He's an absolute ghoul of a human being, to his team, to his own fan base, to the community at large around them. He's a parasite. He's a problem.
Well, he's gone. So,
every house needs a basement. Every list needs a bottom. And Dan Snyder is absolutely where you start if you're trying to talk about NFL owners and where they fall. I think you could also throw in there, I didn't include his picture, but the owner of the Oakland A's.
Yeah, sure.
Who just like unscrupulously tanked his own team on. It was Major League, the movie, but in real life.
Yeah.
I'm going to tank my team for long enough that I can then say I'm losing money so I can move my team.
Yep.
And it's horrible, right? I mean, Dan Snyder, though, has been the worst sports owner, I think, in the history of any organized sport in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And the way I qualify that statement is by saying you don't get congressional hearings held about what a piece of shit you are if you're not one of the worst. Like, who's the last guy to have a group of Congress people? Like, when you talk about things different parties politically can get together about this day and age, and one of them happens to be that guy's garbage.
Yeah, that's
how you know you're terrible.
That's that qualitative evidence that you were talking about earlier.
Dan Snyder sucks so badly he unified Congress for at least a few shining moments. The next up is Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones isn't quite the ghoul that Dan Snyder is, right? He's not an absolute abomination who's been a parasite to his own fan base and taken advantage of his communities and some of the most vulnerable people in his own like organizational structure. Like, Dan Snyder's a scumbag. Jerry Jones is just ego with money that's left unchecked.
Yeah.
I think Jerry Jones is what happens when you're too rich for too long and there's nobody left to tell you no. And I think that I would qualify him as a poor owner because you look at the performance of his team. You know, same thing with, I didn't even get to the team. I couldn't get to the Commanders because of
that's how bad
Dan Snyder is. Take his personality out. It doesn't matter. You've done so much within the scope of actual football that's awful to your employees, to whatever. You're garbage. Jerry Jones. I don't know that he's garbage because he seems to treat everyone who works for the Star well, and there's been no complaints. There's been no massive exposés other than he's knocked up a few women and then paid them made them sign NDAs.
What billionaire hasn't?
The funny part is he's suing one of them.
Yeah.
To get the money back after she broke the NDA, and that's just petty. I mean, your team is worth $10 million. You're going to sue this lady for what? What are you talking about?
How much does hey, I won Super Bowls X amount of years ago factor into this? Because
the fan base would have turned on him already if he wasn't Jerry Jones. If he didn't win back-to-back Super Bowls, and he also didn't make the team America's team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They would have turned on him already. His problem is he meddles. He's won, but he meddles a lot.
Well, he doesn't meddle a lot. He's the GM.
I know.
I mean, that's a little bit more than meddling.
I guess. And that's where you go, this is a guy whose ego will always hold him back as an owner because he doesn't know servant leadership. He doesn't understand this concept. Like, he thinks he's doing the hard work, but what he's doing is he's throwing away everybody else's hard work. His scouting department, his actual GM, like the guy who's crunching contract numbers. And these people in the building are being marginalized by that guy's ego. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem. And that makes you a poor owner. What I'd like to call Jerry Jones Jr. is Mr. Haslam. Jimmy Haslam from the Cleveland Browns. He's a poor man's Jerry Jones, both literally in terms of his bank account and also the quality of this football team. But he has the same problem.
Is it Flying J?
Flying J. Remember when he was ripping off truckers? So here's a guy who just can't stop listening to the wrong people and also injecting himself into the operation of the organization, much like a Jerry Jones. The problem is he doesn't have any of Jerry Jones's acumen. Jerry Jones, once upon a time, was very good. He was petty. Like, another thing, you want to talk about how you build ill will within your own fan base? You take Jimmy Johnson, who was every fan's favorite coach for winning those 2 Super Bowls, and then you marginalize that guy and ride him out on a rail.
Yeah.
Your ego causes you to act in a way that is detrimental to the people who keep your lights on. Haslam does the same thing. He just doesn't have any success to back up his willingness to do this. But he also has seemed like he's turned a new leaf. He's allowed their GM and their coach to do their job, and he's stopped interfering to a point. But he's also made some decisions.
Yeah, the Deshaun Watson thing. How many of your own fan base are marginalized by this decision? When you say, hey, I'm a woman and I root for this team, and now you want me to root for that quarterback. And you gave him how much? What? And you fully guaranteed his contract? No one was willing to do that. You could have had him on a cautionary deal. And instead, you gave away the farm. And then, Chris, did you see they just restructured his deal?
I was going to bring that up, but also Deshaun Watson wasn't interested in Cleveland.
Right.
And then Haslam was like, fully guarantee that shit. I love Cleveland. Yeah. Let's go. Northeast Ohio? I want to live there.
He quite literally pulled a Kenny Powers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Haslam's fault. And so now you look at them, and they're not only in terms of the optics of the situation, but also the financial implications and the fact that he sucks when you put him on the field. He has set that franchise back. That's bad ownership. I believe that that's it's poor in terms of your community. It's poor in terms of your fan base. It's poor in terms of just being an owner who wants to win. Like, you're bad at this. And then there's a middle ground. And when you start crossing that and getting towards the other side of the line, there's guys like Steve Biscotti. Now, Steve Biscotti keeps pretty quiet. Mm-hmm. For most owners, he speaks now and again, stays off the grid. He's quietly one of the richest owners in the NFL. And
he looks, Ryan, you weren't here for it. Steve Biscotti right there in that photo looks like he is an extra that should be standing next to Mr. Larson and Happy Gilmore
I could see
on
that.
the golf course with that fucking jacket and shirt.
He's so rich, he doesn't care what you think about his wardrobe. That's what I love. Like, I remember being at Templeton Landing one night here in Buffalo, back when it was still a nice restaurant. Now it's a mess. But when it was still like white linen, like linen napkins and formal sit down and very kind of like, I don't want to say stuffy, but a little stuffy. We're at this restaurant and this guy walks in and he's wearing Dockers, like boat shoes, Docker shorts, and this Hawaiian shirt that's just ducks and fishing hats. And he goes to the bar. And the guys I'm with are like, look at that guy. He looks like shit. And I go, no, you don't understand. That guy's got FU money. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, yeah, okay, Dad. I go, no. Watch. Sure enough, this 26-year-old, he had to be probably in his early 60s, mid 60s. This 25-year-old blonde, just 10, walks through the door, goes, sits down next to him at the bar. They have a couple drinks. And then they get up and they go out front. And at the time they had valet service. And I watched them pull his Bugatti to the front of the building. And I go, guys, that dude has so much money, he doesn't care what we think.
Yeah.
This is his version of wearing pajama pants out in public.
Yeah. He put on shoes because he had to.
And so in that way, Steve Biscotti's kind of like this. His team's competitive. He's found a way to keep, like, not only find, but retain good coaches, good GMs, good talent. He gives his staff enterprise to go do things and to
stays out of their way.
He stays out of their way. He stays off the map. He doesn't make public statements a lot, but when called upon, he talks about things, and when there's issues, he shows up and he speaks on them. And then otherwise he gets out of the way and just gives his staff everything they need to be competitive. And I think it's one of the reasons that the Ravens are perennially a contender every single year, regardless of who is taking the helm at quarterback, regardless of what the roster looks like, because they have good people running the organization. And that's a direct byproduct of having a good owner, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you move it along. Art and Dan Rooney. The Rooney family has done an incredible amount for the NFL.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For the NFL and just NFL coaching and NFL ownership, and for what the landscape looks like now today when it comes to coaching and how coaching searches are carried out and kind of how things work. They believed in equity and equality, and they fought for those things and got them. And they thought it was important to just stick to what they thought was true and right about what it was to own a team and give it all the resources it needed to thrive. And that's one of the reasons that they have more, well, what is it? It's them and the Cowboys, right?
Yeah.
For Super Bowl count?
Yeah. Yep.
What is it, 6?
6 apiece, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're all in and around the same age. I just turned 40 over a month ago. 3. Right there. 3 head coaches in my 40 years on this earth is what it's impressive. Steelers are. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. That's it.
And they've been competitive the entire way.
Yep.
And that kind of defines what good ownership is. Not only am I competitive, but I'm doing the right things by my fans. I'm doing the right things by my constituency who live in the area there. They're known for their charity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then at the same time, I'm also trying to pave the way for other people to have better.
Yep.
Who will come after me. And that leaves us to who I think belongs on the far end. And every Bills fan is going to hate this. Robert Kraft.
I strongly disagree. And not because I don't like him. Not because I don't like him. Not because I don't like him.
Robert Kraft has won a ton of games. But beyond just being
Who's won a ton of games?
Well, Bill Belichick.
Who's won a ton of games?
Bill Belichick.
Tom Brady has won a ton of games.
Now, here's the thing. When you look at what good ownership is, one of the things, and I love that you have this reaction, one of the things Bills fans are loath to admit is that Robert Kraft's philanthropy work is almost unmatched in the NFL. You look at all the money that NFL owners spend to just, hey, I have, and most of it for them is a tax write-off, right? Like they're doing this to reduce their tax
write-off. It's not most of it.
But they're doing it for the purposes. Not like, hey, I actually believe in this cause. I'm doing it because I feel like I have to. My accountant tells me I got to offload some cash. He genuinely believes in it. The cancer stuff that he supports because he lost his wife to it.
Sure.
Just like the local hospitals who he really puts on for. They're in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire and in the New England area because he believes in that. And that's important. He's helping his entire region.
Mm-hmm.
His philanthropy is incredible. And then you also got to figure all the money he's putting into the pockets of those undocumented Chinese women. What? Allegedly, are
helping
we
them towards citizenship? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. If his wife died, if someone's allowed to go hang out, it should be that guy because of how much civic good he's done. But everyone listening to this goes, this guy.
Didn't you just say he was a full-on rapist?
No. Some may say that.
Hang on.
It don't come out my mouth correctly.
I love that the guys, what you don't know if you heard that is he's referencing the Jeopardy episode where it's philanthropist is one of the categories. It's the SNL Jeopardy speech.
Will Ferrell.
Jeopardy skit with Will Ferrell.
I was referencing Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh no.
Charlie Kelly is on a blind date with somebody, and he doesn't know how to. He's illiterate.
Yeah.
He's trying to pronounce the word that he's a philanthropist to his date, and he was like, "Oh, I'm a full on rapist," and then she's like, "Do you mean philanthropist?" Yeah, it doesn't come out of my mouth correctly. Yeah, obviously you're illiterate, Charlie Kelly. Jesus Christ.
So I look at him and I say, you not only do all these great things, you have a lot of money, you could throw it around in a lot of ways, you do a lot of civic good. At the same time, you oversaw a dynasty, probably the craziest dynasty the NFL will ever see.
Who oversaw a dynasty?
And what you had the good sense to do, unlike people who have more money than you, like Jerry Jones, is you took your hands off the friggin' wheel and you said, I hired good people. I trust those good people to do their jobs, and I'm not going to meddle. I'm going to sit here and not put my ego, because you know that these are all vanity projects. If you own a sports team, it's because you have an ego and you think that you can steward this thing to being a winner. It's the only reason you buy a sports team at all. When he found out that, hey, there's something real happening here, and these two are going to be the guys who get it done, I'll step aside and let them do it. Because if I meddle, what happens? If you gave Bill Belichick and Tom Brady to Jerry Jones, how long do you think they have with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was more meddling towards the end.
Sure, because he felt more and more as he was watching the results start to dip that he had to.
And I think there's...
And that almost speaks to the fact that there was never not a want to get involved. There was an understanding that I shouldn't rock the boat.
Yeah, and I think the way he's handled the Belichick thing has, I think, soured him for, I think, people that are paying attention. It should sour them. I mean, the fact that he went to Arthur Blank and badmouth Belichick to the point where Belichick didn't get hired, didn't get that job. The hit piece that they put out, the documentary that they called it, that they put out about Belichick, that just turned into a shit on Belichick. I think it was Do Your Job. I think it was called that documentary. It just, there's a lot that says to me that maybe he was so busy doing the philanthropy and the good, which is good. I mean, he's a good guy to give a lot of money to, but I would argue that he fell ass backwards into a really good situation, and
he knew
does
enough.
But does that make him a good owner, or does that make him somebody who started on third base and just got lucky with the hire?
And
do we know who his head coaches are over his tenure of ownership? Bill Parcells, Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick.
Yep.
Now Gerard Mayo.
We
don't know, but that's a pretty good start for your ownership. Parcells, Pete Carroll, before he became Pete Carroll, and Bill Belichick.
And so
but you lost Pete Carroll.
Yes.
And this is why I like this conversation, because it illustrates that even that is subjective.
Sure.
Like, we can talk about how the hierarchy, and it's still subjective, right? So now, if we've established this, though, and we kind of understand what makes and what doesn't make good ownership, and what's objectionable, what's able to be debated, that brings us to the question, Chris, if you want to advance this sucker, where here does our boy Terry belong? And that's a complicated question. Now,
I don't know that it's complicated.
Where do you fall on this?
I would put him between Jerry Jones, probably just below Jerry Jones.
Wow.
I honestly think, and we've talked about this, I've texted you this, I honestly think now that Dan Snyder's gone, I think you could make the case that Terry Pegula is the worst owner in the NFL.
And that's a hell of a thing to say. So I was going to say now,
where do you factor in him owning the Sabres?
Well, I take it as two separate things, right? Okay. I think he's the worst owner in the NFL, and I also think he's the worst owner in the NHL, aside from, and I don't know a lot about the NHL, so you would know more than me on this. Probably lower, or maybe he's a little bit higher than like the Coyotes owner. I don't even know if the Coyotes have an owner. I know they don't have a stadium.
See, I'd put
the Blue Jackets.
I'd put Pegula for the, but I honestly think that when it comes to the Sabres ownership, the problem that they've had with the bad hires and treatment of people within the facility, I think stems from Kim Pegula prior to her health thing that she meddled too much. Well, and I think that might be why Pat LaFontaine left his position as vice president.
Can I tell you the story of how that happened? And I'm going to put the allegedly quotes around this, but I've heard it from a source that I'm not going to try to refute. The Sabres begged Pat LaFontaine to come here and be like a face and kind of, hey, the thing with the Islanders didn't work out, but it's okay. If you're interested in that, we'd love to have you. It would be good for ticket sales. It would be good for the general community's feeling about where we're going.
When was this? What year was this?
This must have been 15,
give it a Google.
15 or 14.
Chris,
okay.
A few years after he bought the team.
But what this is, the Pat LaFontaine situation, and we're in it.
Because again, I don't know anything about hockey.
The LaFontaine situation that we're in, we're kind of in it again with Lindy Ruff because it's the equivalent of bringing back Marv Levy to save face with the fan base. That's how I view the Lindy Ruff hire, the Pat LaFontaine hire, which also was the Ted Nolan rehire. It was just trying to let's go back to when we were good, just like Marv Levy's GM.
Yeah. So Kim Pegula was given the ability to object to a lot of things and kind of weigh in on hockey topics in the direction of the team and be the de facto GM. And the problem is that when you hire a guy like Pat LaFontaine who's played the game and understands the game and thinks that someday he saw himself being like a Chris Drury.
Sure, yeah.
Hey, I can go be a GM of a team because I understand the game. I played it at a high level.
And hockey's one of the, it seems...
I have an eye for talent.
And hockey and basketball seem to be along that same vein where that tends to translate.
That does
13, 14, 14, 15. Okay. When we brought in LaFontaine and Ted Nolan.
So what happens is...
Two of the worst seasons that they've had since Pegula took over.
Kim Pegula continues to try to assert herself in terms of where we should be acting as a hockey team and what moves we should be making or shouldn't be making.
Now, let's be clear, though, as we continue this conversation, we're counting Kim as an extension of Terry, correct? Like, this is...
And this is the thing.
Because he's empowered his wife to have this responsibility.
He is empowering her to have these responsibilities. But this is where I look at Terry Pegula, and I feel like this belongs in his jacket. And it's always been in my mind when we have these conversations. Obviously, that doesn't go well.
No.
When you have a jock who's being told by someone who never played the game, hey, you're wrong, and I think this... So he just told her flat out, you don't know what you're talking about and you need to leave my office. And so then it was mandated that he apologize for not the fact that he said it, but the way he said it. And his explanation was that if I have to sugarcoat myself, then this relationship isn't going to work.
Sure.
Because you're putting someone who doesn't know the game. You're making me work with someone who doesn't know the game, and I have to talk to them about it, and then I also have to kowtow to them while I'm doing it. And the mandate was made, you need to apologize, and that's why he left the building. Like, Chris, his tenure only lasted
he was only a couple months.
Yeah.
And then he abruptly left the building and was never seen again.
Sure.
Because that's the same way he left the last job. The second they asked him to compromise himself as what he thought he could be as a professional in the hockey sense, he's like, I don't need this. I will just leave. Mm-hmm. And he did. And I applaud him for doing it because I don't know that I could take advice and criticism and direction from someone who does not understand the sport that we're talking about.
So now he's back. Is he still working with the NHL? Is he still?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. So you have this, and I look at that, and
it's the same thing as a long snapper. Unless he does something egregious, you don't hear his name.
Sure.
So I'm sure he's still with the NHL. Sure. So I look at Terry, and I go, you were the one who put this whole structure together.
So I look at Terry and I go, you were the one who put this whole structure together. you thought it would be a good idea to pair your wife with Pat LaFontaine and say that they should work together.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also, in a way, kind of marginalized him.
Well, I mean, here's what I'll say. I'll jump in because I feel like, and Chris and folks listening can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like Drew, you're beating around the bush a little bit about this, right? Like, okay, so let's talk about when Terry Pegula took over for the Sabres. Let's just start there, right? It was the first team he bought into. The first thing is he paid $189 million, right? He got the Sabres, he got the rights to the Nighthawks in Rochester, and he got the Bandits. Proceeds to sell off the rights to the Nighthawks. They take the name, they take the history of that team in Rochester that had won titles in the lacrosse league. They get moved to Halifax, and now that's the team that's in Halifax, the lacrosse league. They took the entire history of the Nighthawks, right?
Halifax Thunderbirds.
Yeah. So the Halifax Thunderbirds. That's
such a terrible name,
right? So that's one. So he buys the team for $189 million. The year he takes over, they are 12th in the league in spending. Not bad, right? And he starts with a statement. Chris, what was it?
Hockey heaven.
No,
from this point forward,
our only existence is to win the Stanley Cup.
So what does he proceed to do? From that point forward, they are in year order ranks in terms of what they've spent on their team. They go from 12th in the 11-12 season and 89 points. They go to 21st, 24th, 28th, 27th, 17th, which was the year that the Okposo, right? Is that how you say it? I don't know. I don't know. Watch hockey.
K is silent.
Okay.
Okposo
and O'Reilly. That's the year that they signed big deals and their signing bonuses
so
kicked in.
Right?
Now
I have two open.
So he's 16th. He's 17th that year. 27th the next year. 16th, which is the year that the Jack Eichel extension kicks in. He's getting paid $10 million a year. 10th, which is the last year that Eichel's with the team. They then trade him to the Vegas Knights, and they go to 28th, 31st, 32nd, 29th last year, 24th so far, at least this year. So what about the way he spent cap money tells you that he has any interest in winning hockey games in the NHL? Just looking at the empirical evidence, if I told you that there was an owner in the NHL and he said, from now on, our only focus is winning hockey games, and he proceeds to have 3 seasons where he spent more than 21st in salary for the entire and never makes the playoffs.
All right.
By the way, he also rode that to a $750 million valuation of the franchise. And the only reason that the franchise is worth so much is because the Buffalo market in the NHL is worth $250 million. Of that $750 million, the franchise is worth $290.
How much is the
market is worth $250. The stadium that he also purchased and has supposedly cares about, wants to invest in, they are the third. That stadium is the third least valuable stadium in the NHL, behind Arizona, who doesn't have a stadium, and Columbus are the only 2 teams in the NHL that have stadiums worth less than Terry Pegula.
Are you factoring in the new roof and the new video board?
I am factoring in that as of the most recent publishing of the Forbes valuation to how franchises are valued.
Hey,
they value it at the third least valuable.
We got a
stadium,
new roof on the arena, and we got a new video board.
So Terry Pegula has come in, and since he purchased the Sabres, he's spent 2 years because of Jack Eichel. He's spent top 15 in salary. Since then, nothing above 21st. But he's increased his investment 297%. Because that team that he paid 189 for is now worth $750 million.
It's like me and crypto.
I love the day that Chris almost locked himself out of his crypto wallet. It was awesome. Yeah. The panic on his face.
Yes.
He goes, I almost lost thousands of dollars. So I hear this, and yet this is a Bills podcast.
Sure.
So
let's talk about the Bills.
Like that, what you just said hit me. Now I want to try to segue into the Bills because I want people who are maybe just watching this and don't care about what seems like almost intentional mismanagement of a franchise for profit. I want to talk about what our experience has been with Terry as a Bills fan. Now, another thing that I have on good authority that I might actually be killed if I talk about how I know this, but what I'll say is when the initial extensions for Brandon Beane and for Sean McDermott were rolled out, like shortly, like COVID kind of whole thing, there was a whole lot written into those contracts about what authority the owners themselves had and did not have to meddle within the structure of the organization. And unfortunately, a lot of it had to do with just what you would think would be the most basic, innocuous things that the structure of our PR department. They said, hey, we see the mess that's going on over with PSE. We watch this thing that you're doing with the Sabres just burn to the ground.
What is PSE?
Pegula Sports Entertainment.
I don't think that exists.
Nope, not anymore. At the time it did, is a shell of itself. They said, we basically are going to alienate you from the building.
Who's you?
Who's you is Terry and Kim.
So they did. So in the contract of Beane and McDermott, supposedly there's verbiage where Terry and Kim cannot touch the PR department.
They have very limited power within the structure of the organization. They can still fire Sean and
sure.
That's any owner's job, right?
Sure. I mean, it's his team, right?
It's his team. He owns it. You can't tell me I can't fire you.
Right.
But within the structure under those two men, there is very little Terry Pegula or Kim Pegula or any member of the Pegula family can actually do to change the structure that exists within the front office, within the PR department, within the actual day-to-day ops groups.
So, Chris, it sounds to me like somebody heard the Pat LaFontaine story and decided to build that into their contracts because
somebody wanted to get out in front of something.
They wanted to handle things a little bit more professionally than Pat LaFontaine did, but they also didn't trust that there wasn't going to be someone knocking on their door, coming in and telling them how to run their franchise.
And for as much as I personally defend Terry Pegula, it is also damning that I not only know this, but then I also have this other thing over here where I have to look at how Terry has handled everything about his ownership of the team. Now, I want to kind of dive into what your allegiances to Pegula are, because it's interesting to me to listen because he's the savior. My wife has admitted she is one of the people who he saved her hockey team after Golisano decided he didn't want it, and that so no matter what happens, no matter how bad they are, no matter what he does.
Golisano was just holding it until he could get a legit buyer.
Sure.
And he did that
it's
well.
It's almost like Golisano was a good businessman.
Because I like him for being honest about his investment in the team. She credits Terry Pegula with saving the thing that she loves, and she will openly admit, we were talking about it this afternoon, but we were walking around the house together, that when I was running this whole podcast theme by her, because I wanted to see her reaction, and she goes, "You're going to talk about Terry?" And I go, "That's the energy." And she goes, "I admit that I'm willing to give him a pass on a lot of things because I still have the thing that I grew up with. It's a piece of my identity. It's something I love." She has the buffalo from the interior, like the swords cross and the charging buffalo. She has it tattooed on her rib cage. She wanted it. Now, she had that long before I met her. I thought it was interesting. I'm like, I love the Bills. I don't have a Bills tattoo.
Yeah.
She loves this team. And so she is willing to give him a pass for any transgression because in her mind, she has what she still can watch and see and go to a game and enjoy because of that guy.
Okay.
And there is some of that.
Sure.
And maybe there's a little piece of me that also looks at the fact that the Bills are still here. And that they did manage to negotiate a contract that he had the good sense to just go to Jerry Jones and kiss the ring and get us a stadium built here in Buffalo so that the team doesn't leave. There is a part of me that says, listen, you at least understood where you were in the pecking order. You knew what this was.
Well, let's be clear, though. I mean, Pegula didn't keep the team in Buffalo because he has a heart and wanted to keep the team in Buffalo, right? He kept the team in Buffalo because they gave him a stadium deal when he wanted a stadium deal, and now his team is worth 200% more than it was when he bought it.
But if there's something that sticks in my craw and that I can be critical, about a guy who I support. And that's the problem. People listening to this podcast will go, oh, you're a hater. No. That moniker's too easy to throw around. I don't hate Terry Pegula. I'm also willing to admit that he is fallible. One of these ways, you've had all of this stuff happening around your team, whether it's the failures in the playoffs, whether it's your coach having a questionable grip on, we've sat here and called him John Fox and questioned whether or not he should be replaced. Now, I don't know what his, based on these contracts, I don't know what is necessary for him to take action. I don't know if it has to be Brandon Beane who makes that move. I don't know. I don't know if he actually has the authority now to fire the GM. I know he can fire the GM, right? Because it's his team.
Yeah, but he can fire anybody, right?
He can fire
It's
anybody.
just how much is it going to cost him to fire them?
Bang. So how much money gets tied up in this? And are there escalators in there if you fire them for whenever, wherever in their contracts?
But he paid $1.9 billion in cash for the team. So, I mean, go drill another well.
He said that, right?
Yeah, right?
And then he tried and it failed. And this is where I can look at him and go, you're also still fallible. It's because you tried to drill more wells and you couldn't. You have a small oil and gas company now and it's not going well. You can fact check me on that. You guys, the listeners. And call in if you know.
I'll fact check you right now. The president is liberal. There you go.
Great. I love how Chris manages to work one zinger into every show. So this is my big beef, if I were to say that I have one. You have all these things going on with your team. Where are you? I don't know. Like, it's one thing if you're Steve Biscotti, and I guess he's trying to take a page out of Steve Biscotti's book, but when things come up, Steve Biscotti goes to the press and he talks to him, and he's accessible. And it helps you as someone who's watching all these things between the various things. Luckily, he only owns one sports franchise. If you had multiple things, you would expect that guy to be somewhat accessible, especially if they're not going well. Terry Pegula has not spoken to the media. And when I say spoken to the media, I mean spoken publicly to anyone with a microphone or who can take a quote with a pen and a pad since 2020. And if you want to talk about and that was at the conference for hiring Kevin Adams for the Sabres.
Right. Yep.
He hasn't talked about the Bills publicly since 2019. The Bills were a very different team in 2019 than they are now, here today in their current iteration. You look at everything that's happened between who we thought we were in 2019 at the owners' meetings that summer and where we are now. We're two different football teams. One was a feel-good story. It was, hey, you're competing, you're making the playoffs. You're on the upswing. This is going to be great. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is a team that's competed for, been in Super Bowl contention. Where's your owner? He's nowhere to be found. And here's what I don't like. I don't like knowing that I understand the personal things going on in his life. And I would never, because I'll be honest with you, I'll level with you. If something were to happen to my wife, I would quit this podcast. I would quit all of my fantasy football leagues. I would quit everything that I do and I would focus on what's the most important to me. And so in that way, I don't want to have to hold this against him, right? At the same time, I don't like that every single piece of news, every quote, everything we get is from some empty suit from the organization while we're going through what is a stadium agreement and a season where you fell below expectations, not once, but twice. I want to hear from you. I want to know that you actually care and that this isn't just a cash cow for you and you're not just cashing checks, that you are also invested in this. And I don't get that. And that is frustrating to me as a fan. And it's also frustrating when you consider where we are in this organization, because you figure we came out of, Terry Pegula is only here because our previous owner was also absentee, except he had actual medical reasons to do so. Yeah. The guy was literally so old that he needed assistance to walk around at training camp, but he was still out there. He was still doing the things. He was still talking to people and making public statements. And when I look at who Ralph Wilson was, and maybe we've been spoiled, when I look at what Ralph Wilson was until he was bedridden and senile and just unable to run this franchise competently, and he had to turn it over to people like Russ Brandon. Terry Pegula is already Russ Brandon. Now what? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so I mean, I would be interested to hear from you, Drew. Where do you put him on your fancy chart that you made?
And this is the thing
in the hierarchy, because
I came into this conversation and with an idea, and then as we've talked through it, or as I've talked at you guys, I've talked myself into a whole different, and I'm just trying to reconcile it in my head.
Well, while you reconcile, so here's where I'm at with it. I mean, Terry Pegula, we already talked about the Sabres, right? I think Chris. I don't know anything about hockey. I'm not going to pretend I know anything about hockey. All I know is what I saw when it came to valuation, what he spent on the team, the quote when he took the team over, and the fact that not only have they not won anything, but they haven't even made the playoffs since he's been the owner of the franchise. So that's one. The other thing is from a season ticket holder perspective, as we so affectionately called ourselves at the beginning of the show, we're both season ticket holders. I just hit year 20. With my season tickets. I got the email today. Congratulations on 20. You're more than welcome to come watch an away game at the stadium if you want. Here's your two options. You can have 2 tickets, even though I have 4 season tickets. You can have 2 tickets to come watch the. So anyway, what I've
wait, what game is it?
It's either the Dolphins game or the Texans game. Are my 2 options.
Okay. So I
mean, I don't know what the okay is. What gives a shit about? I mean, what? Okay, so anyway, so when I initially bought season tickets, right? I bought season tickets 20 years ago. I was a freshman in college 20 years ago. I just graduated from high school. I was a freshman in college. I got season tickets to the Bills from Brockport. Sundays of home games, drove because they weren't good enough to have night games back then. So every game was Sundays at 1:00, the good old days, right?
What was your price?
I think I paid like $280 a ticket.
Because you're right across the aisle from us?
Yeah, Rock Pile.
This
was back when it was the Labatt Blue Rock Pile.
Yes.
This was
So when we bought in for the first time back in like 2000, it was 2011 when we beat the Patriots. And it was the next, so 2012 when I had my seasons. And 2012, we're out there and I'm paying $240 for my tickets for the year.
Yeah.
And I remember my girlfriend at the time coming home from a meeting and going, I was talking to my coworkers and I told them you were a season ticket holder and I told them you only paid $245. And they told me that you're lying to me because NFL tickets are way more expensive. And I was like, not the Bills.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So, I mean, since the I've had season tickets, not right away, but since Terry Pegula has taken over, and you guys probably can speak to this because you had season tickets around that same time, right? The game day experience has gotten, in my opinion, progressively worse.
Oh, 100%.
So the on-field, when I say game day experience, I'm talking about when you walk into the gates, you get through the gates, you get to your seat, you watch the pregame, you watch the halftime show. Every year, it's just gotten progressively worse. The season ticket holder benefits have gotten progressively worse.
Well, you and I, that's kind of what was the impetus of this whole conversation.
Yeah.
They sent, like, you watch around the league, all this cool stuff that they send to season ticket holders. And I had tweeted out, I go, it's that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meme where he's just in the middle, the GIF where he's in the middle of an empty room looking around like, hey, where's my, hey, where is everybody? And I was like, hey, it's weird, but what do Bills fans get? Because I see the Las Vegas Raiders, who suck, are giving their fans this crazy care package that's like a NFL Films music of like, the wind is a Raider.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's that music with a light up treasure map that's kind of the stadium, and then tickets, like commemorative ticket things for each game. It's a cool little token thing to give them.
And here's the trick that
we haven't gotten a flag in 5 years.
Here's the trick that in my opinion Terry Pegula has played on everybody, because when we say things like that online, the response that we get is, well, yeah, but the Raiders suck, so they have to have cool gifts like that to get people to buy season tickets. But I mean, what have the Bills done to warrant dialing those things back. They've given you a absolutely top 3 heart-wrenching moment in terms of sports in the 13 seconds game. They've given you a woefully uninspired performance at home against the Bengals the following season. They've given you a team that is unwilling to address the needs of the team year in and year out. We're rolling out a wide receiver core this year that you could make an argument is bottom 5 in the NFL.
Well, and the salary cap plays into that. I don't blame Pegula for that. See, and this is where we differ. I don't blame Pegula for what goes on in the field.
Oh, I can blame Pegula.
But I think everything else because they've boxed him out. And that's where I can say, hey,
what you blame him for
of you being you is that you can't
But he's let them box him out. So therein lies the issue, right? Is like it's everything is fine if you've got the right people at the helm. And by all accounts, when he got McDermott, when he got Bean, he had the right guys at the helm, right? That's what everyone believed. I still think you can make the argument that Bean's the right guy, right? He's made mistakes. Every GM makes mistakes. Sure. He's trying to right the ship. The Diggs trade, I think, goes a long way with that. I think there's a lot of questions.
Bean also finds Bean's scouting department and the group that Brandon Bean as a GM has been able to build from a pro scouting and a college scouting department standpoint. He finds value. Absolutely. Has he personally made mistakes when pushing certain agendas? Of course. Sure. The Boogie Basham thing, we're never going to let that go.
Yeah.
But you will look at him and say that is a good NFL GM.
Right. But then the questions I've made them myself, the questions about McDermott, about what he is and ability to lead as a coach. But ultimately, you as an owner have allowed yourself to get boxed in to the point where you can't address it. If you probably can't address it if you do think that there is a problem. You're not vocal about the fact that
you're preoccupied.
Potentially it's not working. 13 seconds.
The idea of the super yacht. Remember that? Where they were like, 13. The super yacht needs guys. We have to. When you allowed your wife to take the podium instead of you speaking, and she said, "Hey, our family needs to maintain a certain lifestyle." How did you not vet that?
Yeah.
How did you not know your wife was going to say something that was going to fall on deaf ears?
And how do you not walk that back? Right? Like he's an absentee owner. The team has not.
So you look at the four. Well, you look at the 4 pillars.
Yeah,
we laid it out.
Jack Perry, Darby Allin, and Sammy Guevara, and I don't know who the other guy
Jericho.
is. Jericho.
God, I
4 pillars of AEW.
I hate you so much.
I think when you combine all of those things that we talked about with the fact that when it comes to the fan base, the people that attend football games or are willing to attend football games, I think you can make the argument that every year for at least the last 5, 6, 7 years, he's done nothing to indicate that he cares about the people that show up to a game. We get a shitty cover band every, and hey, people who play in cover bands,
always late.
Paul Wineski, I love you, man. You play in a cover band. You guys are really good. No offense, man. I don't want to see you play before a Bills game, right? Like, I don't want to walk into the stadium and hear you playing for the umpteenth season, umpteenth game in a row. I don't want to hear you play Thunderstruck, right? Like it gets old, man. And you've done nothing to improve the stadium. The food options are still limited. You don't give anything in terms of a season ticket holder gift. That's not why I get season tickets. If I gave a shit about the gift, I'd save the money on the season tickets and I'd just go buy a bunch of stuff. But the fact remains, when you talk about loyalty, if you want to talk about loyalty and draw lines in the sand, because that's what people love to do, right? They love to dictate how other people are fans. You've been a season ticket holder.
Yeah,
I've been a season ticket holder. I can argue that because I'm a season ticket holder, I'm a bigger fan than a lot of people out there because I pay money to go watch this team
whether they're
year
good or
in
bad.
And year out. I was there for Lossman. I was there for Trent Edwards. I was there for your best.
Which is wild.
I was there for
Chris.
everything.
Can you imagine?
I was there when Ryan Denny was your best pass rusher, right? Like,
can you imagine, Chris, what this podcast would have been if I had been a host? Well, J.P. Losman was our quarterback.
Like Chris Kelsey was the best player on your roster when I was a season ticket holder at the time.
Kelly Holcomb, when that whole thing. Oh, yeah. Willie won't he?
I was there. I was a fan to the point where I said, "Man, that Thad Lewis, he might have something." I said that in the stadium. That's how. So
this explains why you're so.
So when you talk about all of that, and then and now you're asking me to get ready to pay PSLs, right? You're getting ready to ask me for money up front to get into this new stadium, and this is the year that you decide to not only take the Bills-Bucks concept, which is don't even get me started about just giving me a percentage of my own tickets back so that I can go spend them at the Bills store or buy drinks on it. But now you've lowered that amount. Now you've cut that amount to the lowest that it's been since you started the Bills-Bucks, sir.
Yeah, it's
you make me pay for parking individually. You don't make it easy for people to park at the lot. You don't make it easy for people to get to games. There's no forward planning. There's no indication that you care about the people that come to your games week in and week out beyond the fact that you put on a fancy show because Jerry Jones knows how to do business and you handed the keys over to him to go out and sell PSLs, which, if the reports today are true, you are woefully underperforming in terms of what your season ticket sales are. As of June 30th, you've sold 3,600 season tickets to the new stadium, which is less than 10% of the total capacity. There's a problem.
There's a problem.
And the one thing that we're looking for as season ticket holders, as fans,
I want to hear from
is
you.
For someone to come out and say there's a problem. And your owner's nowhere to be seen. There's a quote-unquote hit piece put out about your coach that calls his entire ability to lead a football team into question. And the one person who could have quelled all of those rumors and made everything go away refused to step forward and go to bat for his guy.
And that's probably one of the things. Like, so for everybody here, if we want to bring this thing full circle, so you look at the 4 pillars of what makes a good sports owner. Franchise within the community. I mean, you're kind of doing that.
They've done everything to do away with that.
But
the One Buffalo concept. Yes. What happened to One Buffalo? What did Kim Pegula say about there was the bar downtown?
Kim's not here anymore. Oh, no. She said it was underwhelming, and she thought she wanted. This is coming from someone who knows the bar manager and the kitchen manager of the facility when it first opened at 716. When they built that place, Kim Pegula walked in and was unimpressed and said that it was underwhelming and that she thought that she would be getting something more for their money.
Yeah.
She wanted something a little more white collar. And unfortunately, that's the attitude that I think that they've taken to this. And now that when they realize they weren't going to get it, they've treated a lot of things from a distance. Franchise within the community. I don't know. Tepid at best. Tepid at best.
Franchise in the community because of the community.
Yes.
Bills fans and Sabres fans and the people of Buffalo and the surrounding area. City of good neighbors, right? Like, there's a reason that there's franchise in the community. It's not because of Terry Pegula.
Customer focus and servant leadership?
Not.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Success in their field?
Absolutely not.
Debatable.
No, it's not debatable.
Debatable.
How many titles does he have? How many titles does he have? Because we talked about at the beginning of the show, at the end of the day, Jerry Jones has the sway he has because he's got 2 Super Bowls.
Yep.
Right? So
3.
Right? So what success? I mean, anyone who wants to hit me up on Twitter, on any social media.
Where can they find you?
They can find me on Ryan Lasal _RSN on Twitter. Feel free to slide into the DMs if you don't want to put it out publicly, but I will ask you, what success has Terry Pegula brought to this team?
And understanding the social contract.
He's asking you and I are pro new stadium. We've done shows about this. I don't have an issue personally with the PSLs, right? But the way that it's been handled has been so incredibly tone deaf that it's astounding to me how tone deaf this franchise continues to be regarding asking a blue collar working class below median income in terms of large cities and NFL franchise cities in the United States, asking them to shell out this kind of money for PSLs and not addressing it head on.
You know who
it's again an absentee owner and an absentee franchise who has said, you will get your prices when you come for your stadium tour. We will not announce them ahead of time, which probably makes sense from a fiscal perspective.
Sure,
how do you run supply and demand, right? Like, how do you run supply and demand if I know that I can sit and wait for $500 PSLs? Why would I pay $1,000? Right?
I'm incredibly shrewd.
But at the end of the day, every franchise that has done this process has announced what the PSLs would look like, right? Like, so social impact. I mean, he has no idea. From someone who, again,
with all
we've
this
talked about this being a right, he has no idea what the people of Buffalo go through on a day-to-day basis to support this franchise. And if it comes off as he doesn't care.
Here's the worst part. You know who this just makes me think of as we kind of close this all out?
Donald Trump.
You know what's funny? Donald Trump.
So there's a show. Would Donald Trump be a better owner of the Buffalo Bills?
Hang on. I texted it to Ryan and I have to find it. There is a Trump tweet where he...
Oh, yes. I remember you sending me this.
Oh, my God. Please let me
Did
find
he say something about the...
In the meantime, while we look for that, Drew, I still want your answer. Where do you put him on your sliding scale that you put together?
Here's the problem. Now that we've started talking about it, my scale has changed. And I think that a lot of people should, if you're willing to be subjective. I can't find it, but Donald Trump had a tweet.
You sent it to me on so many different platforms.
I got this. I sent it to
Ryan Messenger.
Here's this. If you want to know where Terry Pegula ranks as far as ownership among the 32, he is the equivalent of probably Andy Dalton as a backup.
So
that's my equivalent.
Painfully average.
Yes.
Now, here's what I'll say. There's a thing, though, and the guy who said it is famous for it.
Trump?
No.
Get fired?
No. In fact, it's a more famous quote than that. Al Davis once said, "Just win, baby." Here's the problem. If your team's just won, no one would care about any of this. No one would care about, and this is why I think that this season and the subsequent seasons that follow are going to be so interesting. Because I think that, as you've illustrated, there is already grounds to have ill will if you want it, if you live on that side of the fence. If you're willing to at least hear like if you're someone who's critical or is at least in the middle, you're willing to hear criticism of Terry Pegula. And if you're someone who lives on the side of, I don't care what he does, blah, 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 there's a shelf life to that. But if he were to win, it quells everything. One title.
If this team wins a title under Terry Pegula's ownership, he will be able to do no wrong in my eyes. After everyone has listened to me be as critical as I am of him, if they win a title, I don't care what he does, baby. I don't care what he does the rest of his life.
That's why, as we're sitting here, I almost think that what I should have done was just put a graphic of Al Davis sliding across that entire graph, just going, "Just win, baby," because he knew. He was smart enough to know that if you just win, everything else figures itself out. And in that way, guys, we have to hope that the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres just find a way to win. That's it. That's all we can hope for. Guys, this has been a really fun exercise, and I like talking about these things.
Chris, we still haven't gotten him to put Terry Pegula on the scale. I'm just going to throw that out there.
And you never will.
We got a live show to
we got to get out of here, guys. This has been a lot of fun. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. That's season ticket holder Ryan Lasal. And this has been your Rock Pile Report.